I'm Graham.
And I'm Ashkahn.
And we run Float On.
Yeah, and Float On is a float tank center here in Portland, or sensory deprivation tanks, or sometimes what they're called, or isolation tanks. And they're basically these giant bathtubs, pretty much. They're about 8 feet long and usually about 4 to 5 feet wide, and they're enclosed. And they're filled with just about 10 inches of water, so really not that much. But mixed into it is 850 pounds of Epsom salt. So it's just really heavily dense, highly saturated water, which means that when someone lays down in it, instead of sinking like they normally do in water, they actually float. So about half in and half out of the water as they lay down in it.
And that alone is just awesome for your body. Your spine decompresses and stretches out, and your muscles just start to relax because we're not being pushed down in this vertical compression system that we are, all the rest of the time that we're in existence.
Yeah, it takes about 90% of the gravity off of your body while you're laying in there, which is great. Our bodies really love that.
And then, all the water's at skin temperature, so you just lose track of where your body ends and where the water begins. It's actually called skin receptor neutral, which is around 93.5, so a little cooler than our internal body temperature.
And it's completely soundproof as well, so you can't hear anything while you're in there, and it's also pitch black, so you can't see anything while you're in there. So it's just you're in the state of complete isolation from all sensory stimulation from the outside world.
And it's awesome. It's just like this condensed vacation for your brain and your body. And you come out feeling, like you just had like a massage / a therapy session / you just feel amazing. And the after effects last for a few days afterwards too, which is probably my favorite part, is just this post-float afterglow that you get from the entire thing.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Your brain basically, like, the part of your brain that kind of monitors the outside world to make sure that, bears aren't going to sneak around a corner and eat you, is kind of just looking around and going like, oh, I guess there's nothing here. And so your whole fight or flight system just shuts off while you're in there, which means adrenaline and cortisol and these different neurochemicals that are actually responsible for stress in your body are not being produced while you're floating. So on an actual biological level, you're chilling out, you're relaxing, and it kind of lingers with you, which is really nice.
Totally. Your brain waves change. They shift from our kind of alpha and beta waking states down into a theta state, which is a lot mellower. It's also what we hit before we go into delta waves, which is kind of our deep sleep cycles. And theta, we get it for about 5 minutes before we fall asleep every night. And it's really kind of like that kind of slightly daydreamy feeling as you drift off. Only the float tanks keep you there for a prolonged period of time, so maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. And kind of the last time we were used to extended theta states was probably our childhood. A lot of kids are just running around in prolonged theta. And then deep meditation is the other one. So people who've been practicing meditation for years can kind of hit that deep theta state. And that's when you hear people talking about emptying their mind of all thought or anything like that. Usually what they're referring to is that kind of meditative theta state that you hit. So this is almost like training wheels for meditation as well, because you hop in there and your body is just kind of naturally wants to go in there because it's so relaxed.
And your brain also has another natural response to being away from all stimulus, which is just to make up its own. So we end up seeing swirling colors, and we've heard gorillas riding on surfboards.
Weird aliens having sex.
Yeah, all sorts of just a woman in a picture frame who touches your nose and then runs away.
I think my favorite was the guy who saw the woman with the watch, just ran running up to him, screaming at him in German. And he came out and was telling us this, and he's like, I don't speak German. I don't know what she was saying.
So yeah, float tanks they're pretty crazy. They have all sorts of interesting effects for anything ranging from arthritis and back pain to, PTSD to just wanting to see crazy swirling colors.
And the industry is relatively small. We started up back in 2010. And when we opened up, there was just a couple other tanks being run out of a spa here in Portland. And now Portland is pretty much the floating capital of the world, which is really awesome. How many tanks are there active here now? 12 or...
Yeah,
so we'll have
see.
6,
6 plus 3,
9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, so 12 actual commercial float tanks in Portland. Yeah, which is really cool. So that's just kind of a background, on what we do, I guess.
Yeah. So there used to be conferences for float research and for float tanks in general back in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, when the industry was kind of going through a little growth spurt back then as well. And when the industry kind of went back down in the 90s, the same thing happened with all the conferences. They went back down. And so there really hasn't been anything since then until 2010, where there was a Float Summit was held in London, Not by us.
Yeah, not by us. But it had about 20 people there. It was kind of like, supposed to be this thing that could get the industry back on the path to actually be an industry. And then the next conference was in San Francisco.
In the end of 2010?
2011, yeah.
2011.
It was in June.
Yeah.
So that had about
40 people?
40 people, yeah. And then the next one was over in Gothenburg in Sweden. And that one had about 80 people. And so we started up in 2010. So we missed the London one. We hopped on for San Francisco and for Sweden.
Yeah.
And basically just rocked it really hard. Not to give too much credit to ourselves, but I think they were probably the best presentations of both of those. We literally had people from the float industry coming up and saying that we changed their lives and reinstilled this energy for flotation in them. And so at the Sweden one, we just kind of on the cuff were like, hey, would you guys come out if we threw a conference over in Portland? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. So then we had about 3 months to plan a conference is what happened.
Yep, and so we dove right into it. We came back and we started planning it for, this is the end of 2012 at this point. October is when the conference was. And we had such a short timeline. I mean, literally from, I think July was when we actually started okay, let's do this thing. So all the way to October, mid-October, so 4 months. And we invited
Speaking of a business, we'd never thrown a conference or anything like that before. We were just let's figure it out.
So, we just worked like mad for those months and told everyone, got the word out as much as possible. And we ended up getting about 165 people to come out to Portland in October for the event, which, if you're keeping track, went from 20 in late 2010 to 165 in late 2012. So that's just two years.
It's on a geometric growth curve. Yeah, doubled pretty much everything. So we're putting it on again this year and hoping to get around 300 and kind of continue that pattern. But we had float researchers come out. We had speakers on consciousness.
Yeah, we had all the float tank associations from around the world. There are 4 current existing ones. We're all in the same place for the first time ever, which was like a mini float UN or something that was going on. And it was just a lot of people really interested in kind of entering the industry as well. Got to come and people who felt really isolated and alone, and were off in Tennessee and found about float tanks on the internet and didn't think anyone else in the world even knew about them, got to come and see that there was an entire community of people. And
as you guys know, I mean, from doing startups, you feel so isolated when you're doing your own business, and when you run an isolation business, even more so. So having a place where everyone can get together, has been really awesome and really valuable from a business perspective too. This is pretty much throwing this conference immediately made us hands down probably the leaders in float tanks in the world,
and allowed us to launch the whole business plan, marketing packet kind of resource, business to business side of our project.
Yeah, without that kind of social proof of the conference, it would have been a lot harder to actually get into that business to business sales. So events are a great way to really build up your own cloud and industry for sure.
And they're really fun. I mean,
it's really fun. It's really fun.
The float community, I think especially, is just amazing because it's just a bunch of people who love to float, So they're just all these people who are really relaxed and completely, on the level for all that kind of stuff, just coming together, and it's a really supportive community. It's not big enough yet where anyone really feels like there's any competition. So everyone is just trying to help each other and really open with information.
So encouraging.
Really open with helping people, spending a lot of time advising people and trying to...
For nothing in return, except knowing that they'll run a better float and start up a little quicker, hopefully,
And it's great. It's really encouraging. It really feels like even as it grows, it's maintaining that, and it's really having a kind of dedicated effort trying to be a different type of industry than what currently exists in the world. Really interesting hurdle that comes with being in an industry like a float tank industry, which is mostly unknown and unheard of to most people, is that there are no standards or guidelines or role models or really anything to look to for kind of someone who's come before you or something to base your information off of. It's not like a restaurant industry where you can go in and be like, oh, well, here's a ton of advice on how to set up your kitchen to be really efficient or how to get your staff to wait tables in an organized way. There just really isn't anything like that. We go on the internet to, we come across some weird float tank problem. We're like, okay, we don't know what's going on. Let's see what we can find out about this. And there's just nothing. There's nothing out there. We're literally on the edge of human understanding for a lot of the situations we find ourselves in.
Which is really crazy. It's actually an interesting situation to be in where you actually feel like you're pushing forward human knowledge about something, like very early on, maybe a year and a half in, we actually hit everything that you could know about float tanks, pretty much, like according to current knowledge. And so now everything else is us actually running our own lab tests. Yeah, we now host an international float conference here in Portland every year, which is great, which is actually the biggest float event ever put on, which is really cool. And as a result of that, too, we started doing consulting and selling business plans to other float centers and marketing packages. So we've been flying around to different cities and helping people start up, giving them template business plans to help them raise money. Yeah, and now we're kind of switching into almost business-to-business sales kind of category. But like I said, or like Ashkahn kind of said, that was a result of this main hurdle of lack of information. And along with that, too, I'll add lack of knowledge in general, not just information for us, but knowledge on the parts of our customers or just anyone around. You know, when we started up, we're like, float tanks, and people were like, I don't, and we're like, sensory deprivation tanks, and they're like, oh, like, I really don't know about it. And now it's like, you can actually walk down the street in Portland, and probably like 1 out of every 2 or 3 people you talk to will actually know what float tanks are, which is, yeah, it just feels kind of good.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely not.
So hurdles jumped, I guess. It's kind of hard to say, like, I almost think the hurdle question is a better one for us, because we tend to just, like, push against things full force until it's obvious that there's just no way we're ever going to get along with it, or, yeah, really just get past it. And the ones where it's, like, there's no way, I wouldn't even really describe that as falling on our face necessarily. It's just, like, we tried to go down a certain alley, and there's, like, a big bouncer there. He's like, nah, you're not getting down this thing. We're like, okay, we'll, like, take the next alley over or something.
I mean, I guess the world is a lot more chaotic than I ever thought it was before, like, opening a business. So, like, the main things that keep tripping me up are being like, oh, well, let me look into this and see what kind of, like, you know, system of organization and thought has come to create this rule set of this, like, specific thing. And it's just, like, nothing. Like, it's just a bunch of random things put together over time that have kind of, like, molded into this weird tradition that people now accept. And that keeps being something I hit in, like, almost everything. Like, you know, we try to get something covered by insurance, and it turns out it's just a huge, crazy, chaotic world that we have to kind of just weasel our way into. And we try to, you know, figure out something about, like, filters and micron ratings, and that's also, there's just no standard for it, you know.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. If you ever hear, like, 10 micron filters, it just means, like, nothing, essentially. It could mean, like, 5 different things, pretty much. It's ridiculous, yeah.
So, yeah, finding that there are just, like, no real simple, clear answers for a lot of things out there.
Like,
is
for
kind of
anything. Certainly nothing float tank related.
Yeah.
But once again, it's like, that's also just something we get to kind of push against really hard. And I think in the end we end up with a much, like, for encountering all of this, like, trouble, digging through systems and figuring out how the heck the world is supposed to work. We end up with a lot of good strategies for really getting through those roadblocks as well, which is nice.
And it just makes us want to fix all of it. We're like, we just need to start a filter company and, like, set a standard for all these things.
Resources that we found useful. There's actually a couple different categories for that, I guess, because there's business in general, and there's kind of personal resources, and then there's specifically, like, float tank resources. Yeah. But I think the resource that, honestly, like, I mean, if I just had to kind of give the typical, almost, like, hokey business person answer, it's like our team has honestly been the best resource, and we have a pretty big team over at Float On, is one of the things that's really allowed us to push forward so fast. So we have 6 owners on board, and 1 full-time employee and 5 part-time employees.
At least 2 full-time employees.
2 full-time employees?
Yeah.
I can't even keep track of it, yeah. And then we also run a pretty comprehensive internship program, too. And at any given point have probably at least 10 interns. Also, you know, probably helping out about 2 to 4 hours a week. Probably. But yeah, that's been an amazing resource.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we must have a bigger team than, like, anything in the world, like manufacturer, center, anything, and it's amazing. Like, we can really move fast in a way that I think it's just like the rest of the industry can't seem to, or hasn't managed to be able to do yet. Like, we can tackle projects at a rate that's really incredible.
Well, it just takes so much time too. Like, running a float center, I mean, running any business is intense, but let's see. So we're going with
Scoot back over.
Oh, scoot back over. I see. I was like, what do you want me to do? The other resources, though, that we found too, just besides having awesome people on board, is there's some good business resources. So we run a small business workshop in town, which is great. We run Cake, Consulting and Knowledge Exchange, it's called. And the idea with that was just to start a workshop. Basically, we started a business, and like that's great, but we're really young, and so people don't take you seriously when you just start a business and it happens to be doing well. We really wanted something to show that we actually do know what we're talking about small business-wise and have kind of been trained. And we also just really wanted to share what worked for us and how we were able to push ahead and get that out into the world. And then, yeah, so you can go to Cake PDX is where that is, and we have we filmed all of our sessions from last year online. They're about a week long. Or I mean, every week we met is what I meant to say. Yeah, so those are all free online. Likewise, things that kind of inspired that and that we found really useful. Mixergy is great interviews, and $25 a month for premium service. Yeah, I'll just pitch you right there, Andrew Warner. That's a really great resource. Not to labor the point too much, but I really think that an important thing getting started in small business too is really to pursue your own training consistently. Zig Ziglar said that it's not so much like, he said the people who got the least out of anything he had to teach were people who went to just his workshop. Even though that's like the big, premium thing, they paid a ton of money. And he said the people who just read his books and reread them and, would go to his workshops, and that there's this certain effect of trickling in of information. Like it has to be this steady stream in order to really have your brain kind of understand it. So the biggest resource is just constant learning as well. Mixergy is a great part of that. There's a Rise to the Top podcast. There's lots of good books. We really like The 7-Day Weekend by Ricardo Semler of Semco down in Brazil. Yeah. That's a lot of what our business is based on. There's a lot of alternative practices we do. So 7-Day Weekend, Rework, Lean Startup. These are all books that are really good to get. The Halo Effect is another really good business book to get because that's basically just trashes other business books. It's all about the logical fallacies that you'll find in every business book pretty much. So that's a really good one. What other resources? I love giving people resources, so we might meander through this one a little bit.
I mean, the internet is definitely your friend.
Don't search anything on the internet. We suggest just steering away from that altogether. Yeah.
I mean, we basically try to run our entire business on the internet, Google Docs and Evernote and just all the different tools out there that you can use to optimize your own efficiency and organization. It's just
actually
incredible.
Now that I think about it too, on our Cake website, if you go there, we have a list of about the 50 resources, online tools that we actually use to run Float on, just the straight list all the way down of exactly what we use. So that's a really good place to go figure out how we really structure the business too.
Yeah, we're really into automation and making sure that if we're doing anything over and over again, we figure out some way to have some software do it instead.
The Helm. Should we talk about the Helm briefly? Because
Yeah.
that's kind of a crazy sub-project.
Yeah, we were so frustrated with this scheduling software that we use in our business that we just decided to start our own. We're like, okay, forget this. We just need our own float tank specific software.
MindBody.
Yeah, MindBody.
Spa Booker is the other really common one.
Them.
No, I know exactly.
They're horrible, just horrible, and so one of the owners that we have now is he just works full-time programming for us, and we've been building this thing called the Helm, the Float Helm that we're building and developing. It started as just a way to track all of our interns and run kind of our internship program.
And we started that with, he actually came on as an intern himself, our now owner, and he was just teaching me and Ashkahn how to program because we really wanted to know, because it's a really valuable skill. So he was teaching us Rails. And in the process, just got addicted to floating and ended up loving it. It was like, I just want to do this with my life now. And so we ended up pulling him on board as an owner eventually. Yeah, and now we have a full-time programmer. So that's amazing. That runs all of our projects. It keeps track of the levels of our tanks. It's our full communication tool. It does our timesheets, everything pretty much to run our business. We would not be nearly as organized or anything without the Helm, yeah.
And then we're also getting that and kind of turning it into something that other float centers can use as well, because, they're all just as frustrated as we are, and so hopefully soon. We're really pushing fast developing it now, and once we get the actual scheduling on there and everything, then float centers will have this float center specific software that they get to use to run things, and I don't know, it just sounds like a much better world to me.
And if there's a lesson to take away from that, I guess, or what we're doing with it, it's really just that, if you get frustrated with things, or as you're pushing forward, don't think that you have to go with the options that you currently have. Or likewise, if you even encounter business philosophies that just don't jive with you, or whatever it is, it's all really malleable, you know? Like, at some point, someone just made this stuff up, whether it's physical or online, or even just an opinion or a thought process that you have. And really pushing past that and realizing, like, yeah, even for something as complex as, like, this really expansive, like, business-running Rails app, you can make that work. And, you know, we gave our now owner a percentage, Ian is his name, Ian McIntosh, and we gave him a percentage of the company instead of, you know, paying him a ton of money along the way, and we've really been able to kind of bootstrap him into it too. So that's a good, I guess, takeaway from that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh boy, there's like a million.
Yeah.
Organizational abyss is a big one. I mean,
just like, yeah, I mean, we've been really organic in our growth, and as a result of that, we're really also kind of against unnecessary policies and rules, just as like an artificial structure.
And let's talk a little bit about that, what that means being organic too, because that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So we pretty much try to start with the smallest solution to any problem, and hope that we just encounter tons of problems. Or I guess hope we don't encounter any, but it's very likely that we do. So when we started out, we didn't run any specials, any packages, any memberships. All we did was floats, pretty much, because we wanted a baseline of how much people were floating. And then from there, we introduced some packages and got a sense of how people were coming in. And then from there, we went and did memberships based on which packages people decided to use. But the important thing is getting that base level line so that you have something to base it on. Because if you just immediately start with all of these strategies and all of these tactics, then, like, what are you measuring them against? You know, how do you know that just doing nothing didn't make a better solution than all of your craziness? Which creates pretty much constant abysses, because you're just constantly saying, like, well, let's just do it. Like, we can start in with nothing.
Yeah.
Let's just do this thing. And then you're like, oh, well, now there's all of these, like, complaints or something's coming in, and that's fine. It's expected, but, yeah, it's also kind of a crazy process.
Yeah.
Like, we can give you some examples, too, from right now. So, we're looking into some manufacturing, just in general, just because float tanks are so interesting, and now that we're deep into it, but that involves finding out a ton of stuff, you know, like, you need to find out all about fiberglassing and about molding and about different types of that. You have to find out what it actually means to isolate sound and how you do that. Unfortunately, we've learned that a little bit. But yeah, that's another one, like learning about sound. I mean, just all of the learning things that you have to do. It always feels like standing in front of an abyss, you know?
Absolutely.
You, like, see this goal on the other side, and you're just sort of, like, there, and you're like, I have to fill this up with knowledge in order to walk across? Like, okay, let's do it.
I mean, we're in the middle of expanding our shop right now, which entailed a huge construction process, and we ended up having Jake Marty, who's another one of the owners, just act as the general contractor for the entire project, which just meant, like, going to this huge thing, like, you know, all the regulations of inspections, like the framing, drywall, electrical, plumbing, everything was something that we obviously didn't have, you know, like,
oh my god, the
professional
inspectors, like,
knowledge
hated
on.
us, too. They'd come through and be like, okay, alright.
What are you doing? What is this? We're like, we don't know.
No,
Like,
we're really sorry, we thought they had this under control.
and so it's been an insane learning process. Like, you know, it's like one day we're like, so we need to pour concrete here. Like, let's learn how to do that. We have to go to Home Depot and get the, you know, the trowels, and we've just watched Google videos on how to frame correctly. And like,
Last night, I was in the float space until 7 a.m. Because our electrician, who also works as an EMT, got off his 12-hour EMT shift and then came over at 1 a.m. to install our new electrical boxes, which we have to do on Monday night because that's the only day that we're closed. We run 22 to 24 hours a day now. Yeah, so, like, just to give you an idea, so yeah, I got 4 hours of sleep last night and then came down to do this, and that's just because, like, we're really into that learning process. You know, I was there to help him along installing the electrical stuff, even kind of learn from him and figure out what's going on with our actual pump boxes, things like that. And yeah, so I say embrace the abyss.
yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
really is, like, the more you really put yourself in that uncomfortable, like, just feeling like you're like surrounded by a ton of, like, empty space, the better, because it's eventually going to fill up and you'll be so much, like,
you learn
better
a
prepared.
tremendous amount. And even if you never do it again, you know, even if, like, the next time we go through a construction process, we can completely hire the entire thing out, we know who to hire. Like,
And we know what to look for, the small mistakes, what kind of
Exactly.
caulk they should be using around the corners of the rooms as opposed to in between, yeah.
We have, like, an incredible base of knowledge for it, which is just learned through actually, like, being productive and getting it done, too, which is really useful. Oh, man, I mean, definitely seeing people coming out of the float tank inspires us to keep going.
I was just going to say money.
Because
No,
they give
no.
us money. So.
Yeah, it's really encouraging, you know. it is really great just seeing people. Actually, we'll give the same answer that every single float center we talk to that we do consulting for gives to, which is it's the customers. By far the best part of this business, which is really cool to be able to say too, because most businesses I feel like it goes the opposite route. You know, like, oh, this would be so great if it weren't for our customers. And with us, it's the exact opposite. It's wonderful. You see people come out just like smiling and happy when they were super grumpy and angry going in.
Their body feels a lot better. They don't have the back pain they went in with. You know, they've dealt with some sort of inner problems they were having they didn't even know were there to begin with.
And
it's
like
really
some
incredible.
people, you legitimately change their lives.
Yeah.
Like some people come in like the person who cooks our cake for every cake session, which they're all like gluten free and vegan and stuff now, which is great. She's a professional pastry chef, just chef in general actually I think, and she cooks our cake for free because we give her free floats because she was in an accident about 3 or 4 years ago. And has been on pain medication that was really like messing with her ever since then. And as of now, she's on a single pain medication that she takes once a day to help her like with sleep and get through the night. And that's because of her floats. Like she credits that completely with floating. And it has just changed her life. We see that with a lot of people. There's a lot of even for drug rehab for people who have PTSD. One of our employees suffers from PTSD, and when he first came in, he'd been having trouble sleeping for years. And he hopped in the tank and ended up loving it so much that he came back and was interning with us and floated pretty much every day for an entire month. He said he, like, after the first float, he just like went to bed and slept for like 10 hours and like woke up and it's just like, nah, just like he hit the snooze button again and went back to sleep for more hours. And after the end of the month when he'd like floated 30 out of 30 days pretty much, we were like, okay, come on, you're hired. So brought him on,
so it is really incredible. Like, I actually didn't even know going into it kind of how gratifying it would be to see people come out and just feel so much better, which is also, like, really great. I feel like I don't know, maybe we have a skewed perspective on the human race at this point, but we just see people in their best moods. Like, people come out and they just feel great and they're really happy, and I'm just like, oh, humans are really happy all the time. Like, everyone just feels great all the time.
It is true. We see the best of humanity for sure. Like, people are either really excited or like really curious or just super mellow and relaxed. Who inspires us? That's a good question. I mean, I can kind of list off a few kind of private business heroes and things like that. So, Ricardo Semler, definitely, is just a baller. Like, what a cool dude. Read The 7-Day Weekend if you guys have not read that, anyone listening to this. Really, really inspirational book. He just does crazy things. It's all about turning business on its head. He basically, like, employees set their own wages, they set their own hours, like, everything is completely democratic and, like, super empowering to the employees.
Yeah, it's about treating humans, like, with responsibility, like human beings, and how that people respond to that and kind of step up, and everyone is more satisfied as a result.
Yeah, so that's amazing. I was just trying to think of some more of my personal heroes the other day. It's a really difficult question, because I kind of don't think of it in terms like that. Because people are, like, people who've done really cool things, but it's the people's ideas and their thoughts and their, like, how they've decided to live their lives that's really interesting to me. And, I don't know, I guess it does take a lot of strength and individual courage and stuff to do that, but I don't know, maybe I'm just like, my brain is keyed into learning or something, so I usually take lessons away from them and don't maybe give as much credit to the people or something.
Who's the guy who wrote the Human Use of Human Beings?
Oh, friggin' never mind, I love that guy. Norbert Weiner.
Norbert Weiner, yeah.
Oh my
really
goodness.
Awesome, dude.
Yeah, we just started reading, we got into cybernetics, it turns out when you start looking into how to run a business, you go through about all the soft business books, and then you get into kind of the second stage of like lean startup and more like tactical business books, things like that. You're listening to Mixergy interviews, and then you're like, there's got to be someone who's just like gone really in depth and started studying like the math of business. And it turns out there is. If you look into organizational cybernetics, that's really the study of that. But before organizational cybernetics came cybernetics, and I guess coining that partly was Norbert Weiner, who. Yeah, just an amazing human being. If you haven't read The Human Use of Human Beings, it's pretty much the book that started the idea of like cybernetics and robotics sort of in our society now. And
even that it focuses like even less on robotics and more just on general like kind of response systems and how like feedback loops and stuff like that get put out, and just like action and response and learning and that whole process through everything, through humans, through machinery, through communication. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, Norbert Weiner's a really good one to throw in there.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, that's, I mean, this guy? I mean, the entire team. Honestly, anyone who I find who's doing really good work and working really hard and really trying to make a go at it for a good reason. Like, I find that really inspirational, and you see it all around. Like, working with cake is great because we see all these really small stage businesses starting up, you know, and that's really inspirational. Yeah, honestly, like, all of our business partners, there's a reason we have 6 business partners, which is kind of like, as we get more people, we just kind of keep getting re-inspired and bringing them on and giving them more responsibility. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone else? Startup Weekly.
Yeah, absolutely. Very inspirational.